Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and I'm joined by my co-host in Germany, Richard Godfrey. Good morning, Richard.
Good afternoon, Jeffrey.
So we've had, as we suggested, some amazing responses to what Captain Martin Smith saw, and the follow-on to that, the tracking of the Poseidon aircraft into the southern Indian Ocean. We've had loads and loads of questions, and we're going to try and get through some more of them today. So from Woodchuck 2024, this is not so much a question, but more of a conjecture on my part. I think that those unknown US Poseidons that flew virtually the same course as MH370 flew were trying to figure out if MH370 was still a viable threat to US and Allied bases and other areas of interest. To the Americans, they probably thought, why is this commercial airliner flying erratically in the southern Indian Ocean? Or perhaps it posed as a threat to their base in Diego Garcia. And they sent out the Poseidons to ascertain if MH370 was another airliner that was going to be used as a weapon. Obviously, the US determined that MH370 wasn't a direct threat to any US military interests, but they probably know more facts and details than they are letting on. I was in the US military at one point in my life, and I'm just thinking like I was still in the military. Fascinating position.
Yeah, Woodchuck, thank you for this comment and your conjecture. Any aircraft that diverts from its flight plan in the opposite direction, in this case, back across Malaysia, must be considered a potential threat. An unresponsive commercial airliner, no communication whatsoever, that significantly diverts from its flight plan for longer than 7 minutes is defined as a potential threat, and a state is authorized under ICAO rules to scramble fighter jets to intercept that aircraft and force it to land. Now, in response to the Korean Airlines incident with flight KAL 007 back in 1983, the ICA issued a document titled The Manual Concerning Interception of Civil Aircraft. And latest since 9/11, I think everyone recognizes the gravity of this procedure. And let me just outline that procedure briefly. Number one, you approach the target aircraft from behind at a safe distance. You keep a safe distance at all time, no closer than required for a positive ID. Number two, you then pass in front of the aircraft and you rock your wings from side to side if it's daytime, or you flash your navigation lights or your afterburners if it's nighttime. And that indicates follow me. The next thing you do is you lead the aircraft and you turn and roll out in the intended direction where you want the intercepted aircraft to follow. And if you need a second signal, you climb a turn across the flight path with flares to emphasize compliance. And the final signal is rocking of wings repeatedly until the intercepted aircraft complies and lands at the designated airfield. That's what you're supposed to do. The Malaysian Defense Minister, Hishamuddin Hussein, stated since MH370 was a scheduled commercial flight and posed no overt threat, there was no point in dispatching fighters if they are not going to shoot it down. This is a ridiculous and misleading statement. You do not shoot down a commercial aircraft, you intercept it and force it to land in accordance with the ICAO procedure. Now, there have been 5 confirmed cases of a commercial airliner being shot down, and we're planning an episode on the shooting down of Korean 007 and Malaysian 17 by the Russians. And we're planning that, I think, for the 1st of June,
Yep.
Sunday in 10 days' time. The diversion across Malaysia was already a threat to Malaysia, but coming to your point, the flight route when MH370 later at 1830 UTC joined P627 flight route from its waypoint near Nilam down to a waypoint called Povus. And we're showing this flight route on the screen now. If you carried on in that heading of 240 degrees magnetic, you'd head directly for Diego Garcia. So at one point, MH370 clearly was posing a threat to Diego Garcia.
But Richard, the diversion was already a threat to Malaysia before becoming a threat to Diego Garcia.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. ATC in Malaysia had no ADS-B at 1720 UTC. They lost contact on their radar, secondary radar, at 1721 UTC. ADC in Vietnam queried where MH370 was and had no radio contact. ATC in Malaysia tried again to contact MH370 by radio at 1741 UTC. There were no ACARS message, no response to a SATCOM message, no response from MH386, which was asked to relay on the emergency frequency 121.5 and the operational inter-aircraft frequency on 123.45 megahertz, and no response. So that point, mass operations, Malaysian Airlines operations, were asked, and they had a tracking system that told them the position of MH370 according to its flight plan. And they were then incorrectly stating to ATC that MH370 was over Cambodia. I mean, firstly, the flight plan did not go over Cambodia. And secondly, the tracking system only predicted the position. It didn't give the actual position. The correct answer would have been, we are currently predicting MH370 over Vietnam in the Ho Chi Minh Flight Information Region. The standard procedure, if an aircraft has a radio failure, a transponder failure, and a SATCOM failure, were not followed. An aircraft that has a complete failure of communication must simply follow the flight plan because everybody knows that and it's published. And that's what people are expecting. If an aircraft diverts significantly from its flight plan and persists on that new course for 7 minutes and remains unresponsive to any methods of communication, then fighter jets must be scrambled. So they should have been scrambled over Malaysia already. They shouldn't wait until any Diego Garcia or anybody else scrambles any aircraft. There was no traffic advisory issued to other aircraft in the vicinity saying that there was an unresponsive aircraft that had diverted significantly from its flight plan. And a Boeing 777, I remind you, has 5 radios, 2 transponders, and a SATCOM system. The likelihood that all communication systems fail is very remote, but there is a procedure to follow, and that is you keep to the flight plan. The aircraft diverted significantly across Malaysia. This was picked up by military radar, who monitored the air turnback continuously, and the civilian radar at Kota Bharu Airport at 17:30. No action was taken by either the civilian or the military until 22:32 UTC, around 4 hours later.
It's just unbelievable muck up, and just
In English, we call it a screw up, and you translated it into Australian, which is a muck up.
yeah, yeah.
But either way, it's a complete incompetence and complacency.
Now, Veritas 256, fascinating update, gentlemen. Thank you. My question is, since the US broadly knew the last known position of MH370 was in the southern Indian Ocean, why did the planes not fly diagonally down to that location, which would take around 3 hours, like the return trip, but instead they flew northeast and then south along the route of MH370 had taken, which took 6 hours to arrive at the location? Wouldn't flying diagonally south to the location allow a lot more time to conduct a search and rescue at the crash location?
Yeah, an excellent question, Veritas. Why fly northeastwards to waypoint Elati on the FIR boundary between Sri Lanka and Australia if you have the over-the-horizon radar data? Why not fly directly to the crash location? And if you know the Inmarsat satellite data, why not fly to the seventh arc? Now, there are three possible reasons for this. And I'm not saying this is what happened, but this is just my thinking. We're showing a screenshot, which we showed yesterday already, of the flight path of the Poseidons versus the flight path of MH370. The first possible reason, the over-the-horizon data that they had was actually designed to watch Afghanistan, Iraq, China, Russia, North Korea, and the Middle East, all north of the equator. The coverage of the Indian Ocean south of the equator may have been incomplete. The second reason is if you have the Inmarsat data, then from the third arc onwards and through the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh arc, you are getting progressively further away from Diego Garcia and progressively limiting the time on station. By the time you get to the seventh arc, you only have enough fuel just to return to Diego Garcia with 424 nautical mile fuel left over, which is less than 10% of the total fuel, and you're starting to eat into your reserves. And the third reason is that the winds at 36,000 feet were from the west and increasing from between 15 and 18 knots at 20 degrees south to between 50 and 52 knots at 30 degrees south. So there would have been strong headwinds for the return journey to Diego Garcia, which also means a higher fuel reserve is required.
Yeah. Ferdin and Held 5432. Great work, gentlemen. Your daily updates have become part of my morning routine. I have a couple of questions regarding Whisper. Please excuse me if they have already been raised. Due to mountains, terrain, etc., can Whisper be used effectively over land? How small an aircraft can be detected and tracked using Whisper, e.g. a Cessna 172? I'm curious if Whisper could be used in a search similar to when Steve Fossett crashed and went missing back in 2007. Please keep up the excellent work both of you are doing. Thank you.
Yeah. Ferdinand, the Whisper uses ionospheric propagation. So radio signals use the ionosphere like a virtual mirror. The ionosphere is in various layers, several hundred kilometers above the Earth's surface. We're showing a screenshot of the ionospheric propagation model. The Whisper can go over mountains and terrain because the ray trace, which we're showing on the diagram, goes all the way up into the ionosphere, several hundred kilometers, and then comes back down at various points, depending on the angle of takeoff. It's called the takeoff angle. And Whisper can pick up small aircraft and helicopters. We've tried it out with both small single engine planes like the Cessna 172, and we've also tried it out with several different helicopters. WhisperNet database archive, however, only started in 2008, and back then it had relatively few signals. By 2014, when MH370 occurred, there was sufficient data then to start using Whisper for a search. Yesterday, for example, there were 6 million signals covering the globe in 24 hours. So now it's very easy to track an aircraft.
Robert Rolfe, 8528. If data and messages can be transmitted back to land over the course of a flight, why can't the data flight recorder in the cockpit and tail also be recorded back on land instead of waiting to retrieve it once it has crashed on land or sea?
Yeah, that is exactly the point, Robert, of the new GADS system. It can send a live stream via satellite from an aircraft in distress and gives the aircraft position every minute.
We should note that back in 2014, which is 11 years ago now, that sort of capability didn't exist.
Yeah, that's now come in only earlier this year as mandatory on oceanic aircraft routes. It is not mandatory, however, for all aircraft in every country. There are major players like the USA who have still to authorize it for any domestic or regional flights. They have authorized it for oceanic.
Sham Disk TV 5K, great series. You're doing an amazing job. I'd be interested in your view on the recent search activities. When will the wreckage finally be found? And is it possible, after all these years of deep sea pressure exposure, to retrieve valid information from the recorders? This appears impossible to me.
Okay, sham disk. Well, what might be impossible for you is possible for some others. We think the wreckage will be found in the next 12 to 24 months. The recorders are designed to withstand sea pressure, crash impact, fire, freezing temperatures, and endure a long time underwater. So, for example, the crash impact, the recorders are designed to cope with 3,400 Gs of impact. That's a big number. Let me put it in perspective. Most people black out at 5 or 6 Gs. Landing and takeoff in a Boeing 777 is around 1 G. Severe turbulence would be around 2 Gs, and the aircraft would actually start to break up at around 4 Gs. So 3,400 is a lot of Gs. It can also withstand a 500-pound object being dropped from a height of 10 feet on it. It can withstand 1,100 degrees centigrade, 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. On one hand, from a fire, it can withstand freezing temperatures. On the other hand, it's designed to withstand sea pressure of 6,000 meters, saltwater corrosion, chemical corrosion, and has a non-volatile solid state memory. You can think of a recorder like a ruggedized version of a USB stick. Both have a non-volatile flash memory, which retains data without any electrical power. A consumer grade USB stick can last up to 10 years with moderate use. An industrial grade USB stick with long term reliability and under stress conditions can last over 20 years. And an aircraft grade ruggedized recorder can last even longer.
Yeah, so chances are it's still there and still intact.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Scott Ann Hill, 8439. But we've got quite a few echelon hits on this episode. I feel I should be wearing a special hat while turning into this material. Kidding aside, gentlemen, most informative and love the database reference guide. Thanks for the extra efforts once again, sirs.
Yeah, well, I also bet we got a few echelon hits in recent episodes. It's a very good point that you make, especially when one viewer mentioned they had a friend on Diego Garcia installing antennas. And I remind viewers, all military and civilian personnel uh, who are working on Diego Garcia go through a very high level of security clearance. And we would ask you, please do not ask any questions of friends you may have in Diego Garcia.
Yeah. So Dallas Nature Lover, yes, please share the database listing of all MH370 episodes. Perhaps put a link to it in the description section of every video. Well, we've done that, Richard, thanks to you. And I did that this morning. And we're now numbering the episodes. And there is a link in the last 4 or 5 of them, at least, to a website which has all of the videos. And I've hyperlinked them all. So you click them on and you go straight to the episode. So thank you, Richard, for all your work there.
That's great news for people who want to track through the archives.
Mm. Now, this next name, Queen Do Mo Feather Podcast 4662. I'm sure I've mucked that up completely.
It's no, Queendom of the podcast, or
Okay.
something like that.
All right. I am curious if you have tried to locate and interview the Malaysian pilot who said he radioed through to MH370 and could only hear inaudible mumbling and a lot of static from who he believed was the co-pilot. I believe it could have been the pilot of CES 539 China Eastern Airline as it was flying to Tokyo, or SIA 638 because the original article said the pilot was on their way to Tokyo. That's an interesting
Yeah,
question.
yeah, but a bit mixed up. Firstly, we have the ATC recordings with the pilot of MH386, as we've mentioned earlier in this episode. We have also analyzed the communications with MH88 and Japan Airlines 750, and also the ATC in Vietnam. So there were several aircraft in the vicinity, but not the ones you pointed out. The JAL 750 was actually flying not from Kuala Lumpur, but from Ho Chi Minh to Tokyo. So you got that one, I think, mixed up. on the 7th of March at 1730 UTC, which would have been the 8th of March at 1:30 in the morning local time, MH370 had diverted and was inbound towards Kota Baru in Malaysia, following the air turnback. JAL 750 had just taken off from Ho Chi Minh and was at around 24,000 feet. And MH88 was in the cruise at around 35,000 feet, but a bit further north. And at 1730, the VHF line of sight radio horizon would have allowed communication with the JAL 750, but not MH88, which was by then around 48 kilometers over the radio horizon, even at that altitude. At the time of diversion at 1720, 35 UTC, MH88 would have been just within reach and probably went out of reach on radio at 1726 during the diversion. So it is possible that mumblings were heard or static was heard, but unfortunately, there is no confirmation of any reliable communication.
Okay. 000 Fisherman, a question for both of you gentlemen. Do you know if Rob Ballard has shown any interest or has been involved in the search in any way or form? I have seen some of his documentaries and he seems to be a very thorough in his deep ocean exploration.
Yeah, well, he certainly is. And when you know some of these guys, uh, you ask yourself the question, what does Dr. Robert Ballard of the University of Rhode Island and David Mearns and Victor Vescovo and Dr. Alan Eustace and Tony Romeo and Craig Wallace have in common? Well, they are all modern day explorers who challenged the boundaries of human reach. And I am privileged to say they are all on my contact list. And if you mention Amelia Earhart to any of them, they will all tell you a lot of their experiences. I've had the privilege of either meeting personally or running Zoom calls on MH370 and Whisper with them and their teams and exchanging many emails. And I can promise you they are all hugely interested in MH370 and what we're doing.
Now, from Legacy Golf Tango Bravo 5934, I don't think whisper signal tracking is a reliable method for finding MH370. The technology was never designed for tracking aircraft, especially ones flying over remote ocean regions. The data is noisy, inconsistent, and full of assumptions. Experts in radio propagation have raised serious doubts about its accuracy for this kind of analysis. At best, it's speculative, and relying on it too much could actually distract from more proven methods like satellite data and ocean drift modelling. I thought you'd like that question, Richard.
Yeah. Well, actually, this is my favorite comment today, um,
Good.
because there are in total 8,535 academic papers on the subject of passive radar. I'm not saying I've read them all, but a large number of people have a different view to your view, Legacy GTB. And I frankly love people with a different view because I can learn something new. Um, People who agree with you are wonderful too, but you can't learn anything new from them. What I suggest is a good introduction to this whole subject is a paper by Giuseppe Fabrizio, known as Joe, who is the key guy behind Jawn. And he wrote a paper with some colleagues entitled Passive Radar in the High Frequency Band, dated 2008, and it downloaded from the IEEE Explore if you have a subscription. There are two other key academic papers on the subject of whisper, one from NATO and the Air Force Academy in Finland, and the other from the Defence Science and Technology Group in Australia. And we include a link to both of those two papers in the footer information below this video. I'd also like to mention my co-author, Dr. Hannes Kurtzi, who has a PhD in radio engineering. And he is leading, or has a leading role in a very interesting project. There is an airborne line of sight system being developed by Hensoldt, who he works for, called the Pegasus Airborne SIGINT system. The Persistent German Airborne Surveillance System is Pegasus, and it's a signal intelligence and reconnaissance suite. And it's mounted in a crewed Bombardier Global 6000 aircraft, and it records and geolocates military radio traffic and radio emissions. And my other co-author, Professor Simon Maskell, is working on a number of projects, including sonar, active radar, passive radar, and he's leading a team of researchers investigating WhisperNet data by comparing it with the ADS-B data from thousands of aircraft using a big data and distributed computing concept. He is also, by the way, a scientific advisor to Ocean Infinity on the search for MH370. And if you want to go deeper, there are other academic papers on Doppler aircraft detection, reference waveforms, surveillance beams, matched filtering, adaptive beam forming, constant false alarm rates, space-time adaptive processing, coherent integration time, and coherent processing intervals, all of which are important when you study whisper. As far as radio amateurs are concerned, I've been invited to run several Zoom calls, and we're hoping to record one and put it out as an episode in the near future. I've also been invited as a guest speaker on the 75th anniversary conference of the German Amateur Radio Society in August of this year. I have also shared my software and data with hundreds of others. Just this morning, I had a request on my website from yet another person who wants to download my software and try it out for himself. And my recommendation to you is you also contact me via email, richard@mh370search.com, and you download the software, and then you can work out whether it is too noisy or too inconsistent, and you can check all the assumptions that are being made. And then please do leave another comment with your results.
Yes, and of course also we've done 4 dedicated episodes to Whisper, how it works, including a demo, and that's in the one of the subsections below the video you're watching right now. But we're also going to put a link to it in the description below as well. So a very comprehensive answer, Richard, and as you suggested, the links to those drop boxes are also in the description below as well. So viewers, that's all the questions we have time for today. In fact, I think we've run over a bit time, but we will be back tomorrow. It may be a bit later tomorrow. We've got a bit of a timing issue, thanks to me, but we will be back tomorrow to answer more of your questions. So Richard, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Viewers, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to us if you don't already. Please like us, please leave comments. And again, there is an episode directory in the description below also, where you can search out all the episodes with a description for all of them. So, Richard, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And viewers, do tune in tomorrow for another dose of questions. We look forward to your company. Thank you very much.